Well, hey everyone, welcome to episode 298 of the Vinyl Guide, part 2 of our 2-part interview with Boston founder Tom Scholz. Now, it's Boston Week here on the Vinyl Guide. We are celebrating 45 years since the release of that debut album, and holy moly, what a ride it's been. A lot has changed in music since August 25th, 1976, and much of it can be tied directly back to the debut album from Boston. This is the LP that changed records, changed radio, it changed rock and roll. It created a whole new sound that has stuck around ever since. It's an album that still sounds fresh and alive and enjoyable today, and it even set the roots for future music movements like metal and grunge. All this from an album that was concocted in the basement by a musician / mad scientist named Tom Scholz. In part 1, episode 297, Tom walked us through some amazing tales of the creation of this album, so if you haven't heard those yet, make sure you do. That's episode 297 of the Vinyl Guide. This episode, number 298, is all about Tom's thoughts on the vinyl record format, the benefits and limitations of recording analog and digital audio, why he prefers vinyl as a format, and much, much more. And I gotta warn you, it gets kinda nerdy, but I'm sure we could all follow along. Tom is quite the genius when it comes to capturing and producing audio. So for today, let's swap out our beers for coffee, lean in, and learn from the man. And finally, if you've enjoyed these interviews with Tom Scholz, please check out our other episodes of the Vinyl Guide. Nearly 300 conversations with legends of music and records, including episode 293 with Billy Gibbons of ZZ Top, episode 292 with Matt Sorum of Guns N' Roses, episode 280 with Mike Levine of Triumph, episode 266 with Rick Nielsen of Cheap Trick, plus episodes with Michael Schenker, Rob Halford of Judas Priest, Robert Trujillo of Metallica, and literally hundreds more. Follow the Vinyl Guide podcast on your podcast app and enjoy the show. All right, well, let's settle into our comfy chairs and pick up where we left off from part 1. Here's part 2 of our 2-part uber nerdy discussion with the man behind and in front of Boston, Mr. Tom Scholz. No limits. Are you a bit of a vinyl record fan?
Well, I'm an analog fan. Period. So, and especially when it comes to music, and as most people, the only access they have to analog music anymore is a vinyl record. Back in the day, the very top, the very best thing you could get for the reproduction of your favorite sounds was a very high-quality tape, reel-to-reel tape recorder. That was basically the pinnacle. And then a close second to that were vinyl records. And I only say a close second because there were certain limitations with due to the fact that a vinyl record is recorded on in a giant spiral of ever decreasing radius. I don't want to get too technical on you right away at the beginning of this. You're early in the morning.
You're welcome to get nerdy.
I'm going to put you back to sleep again. I just don't want to do that. But but vinyl it does faithfully reproduce the waveform of the music as it was actually originally performed, something that, of course, digital does not. So that's why I am a fan of it, because it is accurate, and number one, and number two, because it sounds just so much better.
So you still listen to records? That's still your preferred format, yeah? Yes,
a record, but of course, since I basically spent the last 45 years of my life in a recording studio, if I wasn't on the road playing it actually live, where it was always analog, then I was in a recording studio where I had access to the, of course, fantastic reel-to-reel tape reproduction, and the experience of listening to music with a really high-quality analog reproduction that I was lucky to have in a studio is just fantastic. And the difference between that and, for instance, CD. It was shocking, frankly. When I the first time I spent any considerable time with it, the loss in so many of the things that are great about recorded music. It was really a step down. It was a sad day for me when digital really caught on. I totally understand it. It's way more convenient. You can play a CD in your car. Now you can play it off of your phone. Of course, the phone version of digital was even worse than CDs. So I don't use it at all. I basically tend to run screaming when somebody's playing music that's connected to their phone.
So in recent years, I know you've remastered some of the Boston albums. Do you think that in those updated remixes, those digital formats, they kind of come close to the vinyl experience?
Well, let's put it this way: they don't irritate me as much. So the objective was to try to undo some of the most damaging things that digital does to music. My objective with that was, at least partially, to reduce some of that as much as I could. I mean, there are well-known issues with digital reproduction, especially, and this started from the very earliest days. People noticed that the difference in the sibilance from voices and cymbals and anything with high frequency content, it was just weird. It was not the same as recorded music, and it in fact is not the same as recorded music, not even close. So my intent was, first of all, to try to sort of mitigate the damage that digitizing did to my early records, and at the same time try to improve on the original mixes. The digitizing made some of the things that I considered to be lacking in the music in the mix much worse. So I spent a long time. It was literally measure by measure. I'm talking half a second at a time, going through each one of the cuts. So it was, as I recall, both of the first two albums took 2 to 3 days of like long 12-hour days with basically a guy to run the software. This is another funny thing. I mean, people used to be able to, even in a professional studio, an engineer could handle the whole thing. He could run the equipment, record the music, watch the levels, do all the things that an engineer needed to do. When it was made so much easier and improved upon by digital technology, now it requires two people. Now you have to have somebody that pays attention to the levels and what's going on, and a second person that does nothing but operate the software on the computer. So it's kind of it's like that in airplanes too. So I don't want to worry you, but next time you get on one of those automated Airbus airplanes, just there's the thing about there's somebody trying to figure out what that thing is doing, just like they are in a studio.
Oh no, you're driving me towards Greyhound buses.
I mean,
now.
yeah, I used to fly all the time commercially, and I was never a white knuckle flyer. When they started making airplanes that, quote, were computer controlled, I knew that was a disaster in waiting. And of course, an awful lot of them have fallen out of the sky. Perfectly good airplanes. Everything's working. The computer, for whatever reason, software, computer, human computer interaction, it just hasn't gone well, in my opinion. And for a while, I countered that by only flying Boeing, but they got more. They've also gotten more involved with automation.
Right.
Everybody's familiar with the 737 MAX stories, and I was actually really glad that I am well-seasoned pilot and have owned a little single-engine plane. Slow, but it always gets me where I need to go, and there's nothing on that I don't do myself. So I'm flying it every minute, and I don't have to worry about what somebody else's programming mistakes. It's just a little scary to me to think of that what the airplane is going to do, or in the case of music, what the software is going to do, is dependent on what a software engineer sitting in a cubicle someplace was planning on at that particular moment. Mm-hmm. They might not even be a pilot, or might not be a musician or a recording engineer.
100%. Right now, we're talking, our voices are being recorded, and I always have something in the back of my mind that says, at any moment this could crash, or the file could be corrupt, and then I'm going to have to beg for more time.
I think that was look, I am not anti-computer at all. I mean, we would not have sent a man to the moon. We would not have the amazing capabilities for medicine that we have. We would not have supersonic airplanes that are actually flyable. All of those things absolutely require enormous amounts of data to be unscrambled in a hurry, way faster than a person or a group of people could do it. So they have created enormous benefits in my mind, both scientific and daily. My problem with them is they are being misused, and and I know you're a software engineer, so you can understand this. There are people behind all of that code. Has basically the fingerprints of some person on it, or a group of people, and people make mistakes, and that shows up in the software, and then it's repeated, God knows how many times, over and over again, even after somebody discovers it. So this is my issue: is the overuse of digital technology, as opposed to the required uses of it, where things could not be done without it, and to those people and the things they have done, my hat's off. It's amazing.
So, in your perspective, is there a digital format or some alternative format beyond vinyl or even reel-to-reel that you think can capture the true audio or the intended audio of music?
They're doing. It is possible to reproduce digital audio at a far superior level than we are used to with CDs or solid state storage devices like iPads and iPhones. There are three things that digital that I argued were a bad idea for digitizing music. The first is, and I'm sorry, but I'm going to get technical on you.
Please do.
The first is there's when they go through the A to D conversion and back there is something called phase angle distortion, and a sound like from a violin is made up of a series of a whole bunch of different sine waves that are magically combined in a way that gives it its very unique tone. But it can be broken down into a huge number of sine waves from something called the Fourier transform. For those of you who are really into mathematics and not scared of it as much as I am. So the high frequencies and the mid-range frequencies and the low frequencies are all tied together in that in the shape of that wave, and which hits your ear as sound pressure waves. When it's digitized, there's a phase angle distortion, and the high frequencies no longer line up with the mid-range frequencies and the low frequencies. There's a gradual shift, and you would think, well, does that really matter? There were back when back when people were first trying to sell digital, which is actually 40 plus years ago, their answer was, well, no, we can't hear that. We can't tell the difference. But unfortunately, the human ear, and probably every ear in every animal, has these little ridges in it which reflect sound, and which is what your brain uses to tell you where a sound is coming from, in front of you or beside you or wherever. And music that is recorded in properly or with the kind of fullness that makes a great sounding record actually sounds very deep. When you listening to it on a pair of stereo speakers, you don't hear it as coming through two stereo things. You hear it as something like coming from way back in the wall and surrounding you. If you have headphones on, it feels like it's like you're in the middle of an auditorium. When you add phase angle distortion into the mix, it changes the apparent location of the higher frequencies and mid-range frequencies. And for me, the effect was the music was no longer coming from this deep place in my studio and surrounding me. It was coming from a flat wall where the speakers were located, and it was the most striking thing that I noticed. So that's number one. The phase angle distortion with me was a huge issue. Then number two, the most obvious things when to digitize music, it's not that accurate. You have to select specific times that you're going to measure what's going on with a waveform. So they call it that the clock frequency or the measuring speed. And for instance, for audio CDs, it's 44.1 kilohertz. It was even slower for some other things. Now, there's no way if you have a 16 kilohertz sound, and if you're 22 and you're listening to your music turned way up, you can hear 16 kilohertz. There's no way that you can sample a 16 kilohertz sound at a frequency of 44,000 times per second. It means that you will only get about 2, possibly once in a while 3 samples of each waveform. Mm-hmm. And you can't reproduce. You simply then cannot decode that and reproduce that 16 kilohertz component, sine wave component, reliably. In fact, you can't even come close. You almost don't even know what it was just by sampling it twice. If you sampled it when the sine wave is crossing 0, you end up with 0. You end up with no sound at all. If you sample it when it was at its peak twice or close to it, well, does that mean that that's the peak, or does that mean that that's someplace in the middle of it? So that the problem is that the sample time accuracy is terrible. Now it is possible to sample much, much faster. And now that we have much better storage and so forth for data, now people are sampling at 96 kilohertz. And at 96 kilohertz, you can get a reasonable sample of the high frequencies. But unfortunately, that's not what you get if you plug your phone into your earbuds. So you don't get any of that. In fact, it's even worse because they can't actually use all the data, and they have to compress the waveform, mm-hmm. which adds a whole completely different class of distortion problems. But then the third thing is that when they have a gadget that looks at the waveform every so often. If for let's say for a 10 kilohertz sound that you might get sampled 4 or 5 times. They don't measure it that well. 16 bits gives you 16 different levels of information. In other words, it's roughly. It might be mm-hmm. the measurement each time is just approximate. Yeah. So when they then try to reassemble that as an actual audio waveform, it's just an approximation. And that's one of the reasons the high frequencies are so mangled on CDs. They don't sample it often enough or fast enough, and the measurement is poor. Now, it's also possible to measure much better, and of course, you're storing a lot more data when you do that. In my studio, when I had to adapt to the rest of the digital world, of course, I used 24-bit, which was the sort of the standard, and it's better. It's still not great. It doesn't destroy the really nasty overdriven guitars as badly as the 16-bit, but it's still there, so I could still hear it.
So if there's digital anywhere in that chain, anywhere, maybe it's mastering or maybe it's wherever it is, then automatically the output is limited. Is that fair?
The problem is that music is analog. The things that actually make the musical sounds, whether it's a violin, a guitar, a piano. Obviously, there are digital instruments that could produce either analog or digital, but they came from analog sound sampling. So you have the original sound was always something from an analog source. If it's actually music, even if it's people beating on jungle drums, it is analog sounds coming off of those drums, and the sound after it's been recorded and reproduced through speakers comes to your ear completely as analog sound. Your ears don't know what to do with numbers or measured various quantities. They respond to actual vibrations, which are analog. So anything you do in between there, you kind of want to keep it to a minimum, because you want the analog sound, the waveform that came off of the original music instrument, to be reproduced and hit your ear basically the way the microphone picked it up. And if you have when you digitize in between, first you go through a to D converter which does all this measuring I was just talking about, and spits out a whole bunch of numbers that represents what it thinks the analog sound was, roughly. And then at the other end, it has another gadget, takes all the numbers and reassembles that into a waveform that it thinks is pretty close to what the numbers represented, roughly. So you have this stage in between that was never there before. We used to be concerned about amplifiers and things called slew rate, where that would respond quick enough to high frequencies and so forth, or things like the signal to noise ratio, or the or actual waveform distortion, but not actually taking the thing apart and then reassembling it roughly like it was before.
Right. Yeah.
So this is the problem: the roughness of that disassembly and reassembly, and the errors that are introduced automatically when you do it.
Corrupts the purity.
Right. Yeah, I believe that's what people are hearing. I spent a lot of time with it when I first heard digital, trying to figure out in my pea-sized brain exactly what it was that was bothering me so much. After a lot of reading and study and so forth, it became obvious that the problem was the waveform no longer matched the original waveform. And if you actually took a waveform from a piece of recorded music or just a single instrument, and you took one and played it into onto a storage scope. This is an old thing that would actually show you the shape of the waveform, and it would save it momentarily. It wasn't digital in any way. It just displayed it on a screen, which made it stick there for a while before it disappeared. If you did that, and then you took the same piece of music or the same instrument, and you digitized it and undigitized it and played that through, you wouldn't even recognize the waveform. They don't look anything alike. And you can do the same thing on your laptop by taking a waveform that you've recorded and then play that back through anything that you think that is the best, has the best frequency response you can, re-record it through the flattest mic you can, and put it back in and see what it looks like. It's not even close. Yeah, so when you digitize it a second time, you get a whole brand new waveform. And the thing is, every time you digitize it and undigitize it, you get a waveform that is unrecognizable.
So let me just be devil's advocate very quick. While you record the music, and I'm assuming, there's 2-inch tape machines or similar, these analog machines, after each play, after each take, isn't there a little bit of quality lost on each play?
When you record in analog, we're talking analog, right? Not digital recording.
Correct.
When you record in analog, the losses are easy to quantify. The applicable things are signal to noise, which, by the way, you also have with digital. They like to say, "Oh, it's noise free." Well, it's not, and it's not really that much better than analog when you compare it to the optimum analog. So yes, you have signal to noise. You have slew rate limitations. So in other words, very high frequencies that come on very quickly and very percussive, for instance. There's a limit to how quickly the electronics can respond to it. Those are still limited in the A to D converters when you're doing digital, but they're there for both. What you're really talking about is, what are the limitations of the tape? What are the limitations in magnetizing the tape and then basically playing it back, decoding it, if you will, in analog terms? And you're limited by things like the amount of iron in the windings in the playback head and so forth. So there are slight alterations in the waveform, and I'm talking really slight. So if you take a waveform and you record it on tape, and you put it on 2 different tracks, and then you dub it in again from one track to another, the amount of phase angle distortion, tiny. If you try to combine those two, you can make them almost disappear, or it will. Getting technical again, if the waveform is identical and you put 2 of them together, the whole level will increase by about 6 dB. So it'll double. And if you do that by recording a second, taking one of your channels on your 2-inch tape and making a dub of it, as they used to say, recording it again on another channel, it literally will be the same waveform. The differences will be very slight. There will be only the limitations because of the iron in the magnetic heads and the slew rates of the electronics. There is then the noise floor will come up by say 3 dB. So, but those are the limitations. On the other hand, with digital, you get a whole completely different waveform. It won't even. Not only won't it sound the same, it doesn't look the same. So when you're, and this is one of the most shocking things to me when I first started working with having to work with digital for mix downs and transfers to make digital masters for CDs. I kept saying, what's wrong with this? We just looked at this. This is not the same waveform. Well, it's been because we put it through A to D conversion, D to A, and went back again, and now it's a new waveform. So the difference is it's really sort of like it's night and day, frankly.
So when you sit down in the evening, you get yourself a drink, you want to listen to music. Is it records you put on? Is it reel to reel? How do you enjoy and consume music?
To be honest with you, I take my music in very small doses because I have sort of beat my head in with it for the last 50 years. But what I enjoy is listening to a really high quality tape reproduction, and that can be a 1/4-inch tape, 2-inch tape, or it can be a cassette. And a cassette tape reproduction is actually actually excellent. It has limitations in its frequency response. One of the unfortunate things about getting past 60 years old is you're going to lose your high frequency response anyway, so you won't be able to tell the difference. And the other thing is that it has a higher noise floor. But most people listen to music in an environment where they're not going to know where the noise floor is, because they're listening in the middle of a city street with their earbuds in, and there's noise everywhere, or they're listening in a car. And the car is way noisier than they're. So, the noise floor, looking back 40 plus years ago, was the entire thing that the digital music, people who were trying to market digital music, this was their entire argument, that the noise floor was better than nothing else. And in one way of looking at it, they were correct. Tape had a noise floor that might have been, depending on what you used and how you did it, of 75 dB of dynamic range. And the digital was at least 10 dB better than that. However, people record music on analog tape at a much higher level than they do if it's going into a digital system. And the reason is because when transients come and, quote, overload the tape, the momentary distortion it's caused is extremely benign. And in fact, many, many producers besides me learned early on that the way you got a particular sound is you purposely drove the hell out of the tape, pushed it way into distortion on peaks, and that's part of how you got your sound. So and that was also true in the mixdown part of it. You actually looked for what they call tape saturation, making it pushing the tape so hard that it purposely caused compression distortion on the high parts. So the actual noise floor, by doing that, was actually quite a bit lower than the numerical figure. In a case of digital, you can't do that. Anytime you have the peaks in your digital music going past the zero line, the distortion is unbelievably offensive. I mean, it's horrible. So with digital music, and now as this moved on through and evolved over time, digital software for digital recording and digital music started to include all sorts of things like limiting devices and compressing devices and peak clipping devices that would basically do what the tape was trying to would have done automatically. Because you had to record at such a low level that the so-called noise floor advantage was eliminated. So this was the kind of the catch-22 of digital music right from the very beginning. Was digital theoretically has a somewhat larger dynamic range. You can't use it.
Can't use it.
That's the bottom line.
All right, Tom, again, thank you for the time.
Nate, it's been my pleasure. I appreciate it.
Well, look, anytime you want to have a bit of nerd talk or engineer chat, you let me know.
Awesome.
I really do appreciate your time. And again, Tom, happy 45th anniversary on this wonderful album and this tremendous career. And it's the music is still bringing everyone pleasure to this day. So again, much appreciated and happy anniversary.
Nate, it was a blast talking to you. I appreciate the opportunity. So thank you.
No worries. Man, I'm absolutely humbled. What a great conversation. What a great guy to chat with for a while. An absolute honor to have this conversation. Thanks again, Tom, not only for your time and your conversation, but for all the music you brought us throughout the years. And I would encourage everyone to just break out their copy of that Boston album, that first one, put it on the turntable, marvel at the absolute sonic masterpiece that was created 45 years ago this week in Tom's basement studio. Tom and team, we absolutely salute you for this fine polyvinyl chloride platter of perfection. Happy anniversary and happy Boston week, everyone. That's it for this episode of The Vinyl Guide. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thanks to everyone who's been sharing these episodes on social media. That's a huge help. And hey, if you got a few extra minutes, hop on up to Apple iTunes or wherever you get these podcasts and leave The Vinyl Guide a positive review. 5 out of 5 or 10 out of 10 stars, whatever you got to do there. Say something nice, make us blush. That is always appreciated. And we'll be back shortly with the brand new episode. So until we talk next time, get out there and buy some records, people. Cheers.
That's it for this episode of The Vinyl Guide. Send your thoughts to Nate at thevinylguide.com or follow or tag us on Instagram at Vinyl Guide. Until next time, keep spinning.